It up a notch. Hey, we're here. Are we live? All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome aboard. It is the I think 16th episode of our Coffee Break podcast, and we are recording this live on Facebook. And today we go international, so always a first and always fun, exciting stuff here on the Coffee Break podcast. So all the way from Calgary, Alberta. Is that where you are right now?
Yeah, it's just northern Montana.
Northern Montana.
Yeah, northern Montana. Yeah.
From Calgary, Alberta, Canada, Lars Johnston. How are you doing, Lars? Good morning.
I am doing quite well, Chad. How's things in North Carolina today?
It is chilly. It's a cool 36 degrees this morning, but it's I checked the weather there. It's not that bad.
Man, I don't even know what 36 degrees are. Are we talking Celsius
Oh
up
yeah,
here?
I forgot. You guys talking in different language up there in schedules and decals.
Yeah, we got these funny white stuff all over the ground today.
Is
it's
it
a
snowing?
little different. Is it snowing? This is Canada, Chad. It's been snowing for like 3 months.
It's the perpetual winter up there.
Yeah, that's what we do.
So that can be a whole different conversation as well, talking about how you guys deal with that type of stuff, because here in North Carolina, when it snows, obviously we shut down and everybody makes fun of us. But in the meantime, I'm really excited to have you on. We've been chatting about this for a while. I've tossed out the idea, and I'm glad that our schedules finally aligned, that we could do this today. And have a really fun conversation. You have been an awesome supporter of the podcast and engaging online during the live feed. So it's really kind of cool to have you here today.
Yeah, it's fun for me to watch you guys online because you're doing something pretty unique in the industry I don't see. It's also nice because I can finally get an edge up on you because you can't really respond while you're talking live, so I can say whatever I need. And that's kind of nice.
That's very true. I'm at a disability there. Well,
yeah.
by way of introduction, so you have 7 or 8 different businesses up in Calgary, but you and I met each other through the Medico Security Center program through Asa Abloy, and we are both on the advisory board for the MSC program, and so we've gotten to know each other through a lot of interactions there. So we've known each other for a few years, but tell us a little bit about your businesses that you have up there in Canada and kind of what's going on. Give us a little bit of introduction.
So we got a security group. I hope you can hear that because somebody's making some coffee in behind me. So
very, very nostalgic coffee sounds. That's great.
Yeah, it's perfect. Oh, I see my coffee's ready. But I'll tell you about us first. So we've got a group of brands. It's a security group. We refer to it as kind of like a purchasing group you might think of. Calgary Lock and Safe is our main brand. You can Google us if you want to check us out. But it's a traditional type of locksmith company. It provides locksmith service. Where we differ from, say, Loc-Doc, we don't do cameras and alarms. We are more traditional door-and-door hardware. We've got Calgary Door Services. That's our door and frames division. Does contract hardware, does the more unique stuff, the operators, the sliding doors, the glass. And then we have a company called High Security, and it's a different traditional locksmith company. Specializes in the downtown core. What else we got? And then we have a fire department lockbox company, which is a unique thing here in Calgary. So it's a life safety focused company. It's mandated by the fire department here in town.
Gotcha. So the interesting thing that I think we have had great conversations over the past is that we have very similar organizations, very similar companies, but yet we also have a lot of differences. But as far as the way that the organizations are built, the way that the organizations are growing, he's walking to get his coffee right now.
It's a new company here. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. I think it's French. It's Starbucks or something. Yeah.
Hold on a second, though. Let's back up. Is that not like? Aren't you supposed to go to like Tim Hortons? Is that not?
I was worried it might be a little loud because Tim Hortons at 7:00 in Canada. It's like Black Friday for you guys every day.
I gotcha. Okay, so okay. So Tim Hortons is too hipster for you.
Yeah, yeah.
So, anyways, our companies are very similar in a sense from an organization standpoint. Yet, and some of the services that we offer are very similar, but yet some of them are very, very diverse. So it's interesting to kind of share ideas, borrow ideas from each other, and mostly you borrowing ideas from me, I think, is the way it is.
That's what we've certainly heard.
But anyway, so give us a little insight as to how you got into this industry, because it's not, you're not a like second or third generation security individual or locksmith. You kind of got into it from the business operations side, more or less.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's anyone that is born and thinks, you know what, I'm going to be a locksmith. You know, that's it's not usually what you start with. It just kind of works out that way, unless your mom or your dad happens to be a locksmith or in the security industry. I have a background in business. I was doing some consulting and small business tax planning, and I got two cousins that are both locksmiths here in Calgary. The company was for sale, and they made an offer to buy it themselves, and needed some help with the business side of things, and 6 years ago invited me to come join them.
Gotcha. And so from when you started, I know that I don't want to get into all the nitty gritty of the transition there, but what was the size of the company at the time when you got started? Because I think that's one of the big, the interesting topics that I really want to get into today is team building. But where did you start with, and what year was that when you got involved with that?
It was 2012. We had, I believe, 17, maybe 18 employees, including the transitioning owners. There might have been 20, but I think it was 17, 18.
So for the last 6 years, essentially, you've been involved in really trying to grow an organization. I know you've got several partners in this endeavor, but it's been a very short amount of time that you've made a lot of progress. So you started with 16, 17 people. You're now running an operation of what size now?
Truth is, I don't know, but I think it's just over 50.
Okay, so you've had some significant growth from a team perspective. The interesting thing, the conversations that we have around here a lot, and I was actually talking with our buddy Tony last night about this as well, from a team building perspective, how like the directions that you go, because it's not just you're just hiring at random and putting people wherever. You have to be strategic in how you build your team, especially when you get to that size. I don't know what the specific number is. I've always gone back to saying that like 10 or 12 is kind of my max, and then you have to start having some type of structure in place to be able to handle that as you're building your team. So what was your experience with that? How intentional was it, and how responsive was it based off of the growth as you were navigating that process?
I've had this conversation with Tony from Minnesota a few times as well.
He got British real fast.
Yeah, all my accents are kind of the same, but just depends how you drive your vehicle. So our to start with, 6 years ago, we really made a conscious and an active decision to go after technical people. And by that, we realized that, locksmiths just don't grow on trees. Anyone that's in I'm going to say a trades business specifically, but realistically, it's anyone in any specialized niche. You just don't have the availability of technical staff. If you polled the audience and said, hey, put your hand up if you have too much technical staff, too much trained people, you're not going to get anyone. So what we started doing is we started looking at just building our own. And when you get into, you look at the culture piece, it's, I'm gonna paraphrase what we used to say around our store, but it's easier to hire a good person, and teach them to be a locksmith rather than, vice versa.
Yes.
And not to take that out of context and say locksmiths are bad people. But I'm simply saying it's the culture piece is actually the harder piece to teach, we find. So we've started hiring specific people and planning and hiring for personality first, and then teaching them the technical skill. So that's enabled us to do a couple things. One, we're not dependent on technical staff. That's not our limiting factor anymore, which has been a huge opportunity for us, because we're basically not competing for the standard type of employee in the industry. So that's been a big change for us and a real benefit for us. But also, it's really enabled us to mold the culture piece first, and then and focus on that and make that kind of our foundation, our building block for our company.
So let me ask you a question then, because it's this stuff is just kind of down my passion, right? You didn't acquire? Did you acquire any companies along the way, or was this all organic?
We've got one organic. We have the high security brand has 2 people in it. That was an unacquired company.
Okay.
Just last year.
Okay, so you had one acquisition in there, but a majority of your growth has been organic through hiring, redefining, I guess, or refining your hiring processes so that you're hiring good people, and then the other side of that is developing a quality training program that you can develop people inside of your organization, or else then you go back to the other way of just hiring people that are already trained. And that's a common conversation in our industry is it's hard to find trained people. And you and I have had this conversation before, because I'm not looking for trained people. I'm looking for good people that we can train. And if we're doing our jobs right here, then we're going to turn out quality trained people.
Yeah.
Same kind of concept.
Yeah, you're looking for fit first. If they fit the culture, if they fit the attitude, if they fit, the I'm going to call it the right side of what you're looking at. Whereas I'm referring to right brain versus left brain. If the right brain, they're more creative and emotional side fits the culture more. It's the left brain side that you can really work on. So
question for you.
That's what we focus on.
The hiring part, is that something, and this is a question I've never asked you before, is that something you're directly involved in, or is somebody else handle that in your organization?
We just to start with, I did all the interviewing for the company, did all the hiring. My 2 partners, I should mention, Jeremy and Tyler Bryson, they're my 2 cousins. We did a lot of the hiring when we were young whippersnappers. We did all the hiring together. We then, that fell more under my role. And so for about 3 years there, I did all the hiring for our company. Once we brought on our customer experience manager, Matt, he started doing a lot of the interview and the hiring for the last few years, because my theory was that, if he's going to be, I'm going to use a hockey analogy, you hire a general manager, the first thing they do is fire their coach, and they hire their own people, they hire their own coach, because how can you hold somebody accountable if you don't let them select your own team? So I was a big believer in having, the team leads in our company hire their own people and their own team. So that was my theory for a few years. And actually just recently, I've found that, the more reading I do and the more I think about it, I'm almost being hypocritical, because they say, what's the most important thing of any organization?
The people.
And it's always, right, the people in it. So as you as a business owner, how can you not be involved in deciding which people are part of your organization? So just literally in the last couple of weeks, we just hired 2 people. I know you guys hired 3, so you're feeling the same adrenaline rush as we are. But
yes.
The last couple of weeks, I was involved in the second interviews. We still have our screening selection process, but the second interviews I was all a part of personally.
So this is the neat thing. So we're kind of in that same type of process where Chris and I do a lot of the initial interviews. Actually, we do all of the initial interviews. Really kind of a conversation or an interview for fit, right? Culture fit, and that's the thing that we're trying to hone in on. But there's also 2 additional mini interviews, I guess I would call them. One is with a field supervisor or a project manager. That will be a kind of a direct report, and then we do a field ride along. So we put them out for a tech position. They go in the field and do a ride along with someone, and so we get kind of 3 different perspectives, maybe even 4 different perspectives of an individual before we make a decision on them. And it kind of mixes the 2 things that you were dealing with there. It gives the people that are going to be working directly with them on a daily basis an opportunity to give their opinion and their assessment, but it also gives us the ability, or essentially a first right of refusal, and as we're trying to select the right people for our organization.
Yeah, so it's interesting. We're very, very similar. I was speaking our non-technical side about the 2 people we just hired, but our process, and I'm going to mention this because I haven't told you this before actually, but we do personality type indicators. We use a Myers-Briggs type indicator, MBTI. It's pretty popular out there. You can do it for free on 16personalities.com. Anyway, so we've done that with everyone in our company, and we've started just cataloging it and learning about communicating with the other personality types, because you have a severe introvert like yourself, Chad, and then you have an extrovert in the room.
Yes.
It's hard to get airtime between if you're in the introvert in a group of extroverts. So what we've done is tried to really understand the differences. Well, this time we do phone interviews for all of our hiring first. So you do a quick phone interview, make sure you can present yourself well over the phone. But after that, we actually send you the personality type indicator assessment. So we had everyone do that, and by that I mean probably only about 60% actually replied and did it. But what that did was that allowed us to filter out essentially 40%. But what was amazing was in our customer experience, so that's traditionally you would call dispatch, they were all of the same personality type, ESFJs. It's an extrovert, but it's a feeler, which is high in empathy. Well, everyone in our customer experience department, everyone who's been successful in that department, all happen to have the same personality type. We just hired 2 people new for that department, and I'm not kidding, they both had the same personality type.
Yeah.
Maybe it's coincidence, maybe we're onto something here, but we've found that our most recent accounting person was also similar, if not identical, to the people that were in the accounting department. So it's really allowed us to kind of hone in, and we find people in those positions with high empathy. Those are the ones that tend to have a lot of success.
So it's interesting. The personality assessment is a huge benefit from the hiring process, and we've looked at a couple of different things over the years where they do some of that pre-screening assessment. And there's companies out there. I think if you're in the business of hiring people, this is something that you cannot minimize, you cannot avoid. But there are companies out there that will say, okay, this is they will assess your entire team now and say, okay, where are your ideal team members, and this is what they look like, and now we can filter new applicants through that process and help you do a better job of pre-selecting before you even get into the interview process. We looked at those in the past, but ultimately, very similar to your experience, you find that there's certain personality types that are doers, that are really good mechanical people, and then you have folks that have good feeling, that are going to relate to your customers a lot better. And so you kind of pull that information together and go, it's not a determining factor of whether they're going to be hired or not, but it is interesting as you look back and go, well, that's interesting. All these people, they fit this type of skill set that you need for that typical position.
Yeah. We got 180 resumes from our last job posting. It's like 180 resumes, man. That's a lot of phone calls. Yeah. So the way, I just saw Levi's face there. Yeah, it was. That's a lot of resumes, and just using the MBTI was an easy way to cut them in half, basically.
Yeah. No, it's very true. So dare I say, let's get granular, but what are some other things in the hiring process, some tips or tricks? Maybe, because one of the things that I really want this podcast to have in it is when people listen to it, anybody that's watching on Facebook or listening after the fact can say, hey, here's something that I can take away to apply to my small business. What are some tactical things? What are some practical? Maybe you have a story of a really bad experience from the hiring process, but some things that you've learned through the entire process that you say, hey, these are things that we really look for, and these are some things that we really want to avoid. These are some really big wins. What are something that we can all be mindful of as we're going through the hiring process?
Well, I think the first and foremost is we've tried hiring for the position, maybe the person that wasn't the best fit, but hired for the position that was, a perfect technical person, we'll say.
Yeah.
We found the success rate for that is very, very low. So I'd highly, highly recommend find a person that will fit and then teach them what you want. So realistically, even if, they've been, I'm going to use a locksmith, for example, they've been a locksmith for 30 years, but if they don't fit the culture and don't mesh well, it's just not going to work. And it's a waste of their time. It's a waste of your time. It might work for a few months, but it's not, in the long run, it's just not a sustainable practice. Again, the personality tests are something that we've used just for filtering. We've also highly recommend doing phone interviews first. We used to just bring people in and do interviews, and that it's time consuming.
Yeah.
So what our first tangible step is we do phone interviews. We send out the personality test, and then Matt, our customer experience manager, sits generally with the department lead for whatever department it's in. And then so we're the same as you guys, just inversed. Where once the department lead and Matt have kind of come up with who they think is going to be a fit, maybe it's one or two people, the partners, we sit down and speak with that person as well. So that gives us, like you were saying, it gives us all different angles, but it's a fairly straightforward tactical method that we've been refining. And I mean, we've hired probably 80 people over the last, 3 or 4 years, and this seems to be the most successful yet.
So a couple of pieces of advice that I've heard over the years, and I'd be interested. I've kind of two questions. Let me ask the first one, and then I'll try to come back to the other one. What does a phone interview look like for you? Because mine is very, very casual. I'll talk about that in a second. But what does your phone interview look like, or sound like, I guess?
Yeah. So I'm going to take my best estimate because it's Matt that's actually doing them, but. It's basically just a conversation. Tell me about yourself. How was your day? What'd you get up to? It's just somebody's ability to think on their feet. Generally speaking, it's your first line with your customers. So you want them to present, an affable type of personality. If they're smiling and they're enjoying themselves and having a good time, even if they're nervous, you can generally tell that. So it's a very casual type of, less informative and more just about a personality.
Yeah, so I it's fun because, and I don't want to show all the cards for whenever people are applying for a company, but my phone interview is very very casual. It's very informal. It's a very simplistic process. When they answer the phone, what is the response? Is it hello or how's it going? Or this is, do they introduce themselves, or is it just like, hey, do they sound like they're half asleep? It's those types. It's like, but you would be surprised at the amount of people that you pick up and call, and it sounds like they accidentally answered the phone. But and a lot of those things is I'm looking for, because as you just said, they're the communication to your customer. So how are they going to communicate when they answer the phone naturally is what you're going to expect down the line. And so just the simplistic how they answer the phone is a big thing for me.
Yeah, I know there's going to be a few people in our industry listening to this, and business owners that'll be nodding their head doing the same thing. But it feels like, certainly when we got started, I'm sounding like an old man here, but I guess that's my cardigan speaking. you seem, when you're in the hiring process and you're getting people, you seem like it's such a rush. I need someone right now. I need it now. We got to get this going. And so you tend to rush through these types of situations. And, you know, just being mindful and knowing exactly what you want, exactly what you're looking for, and understanding, you know, having the empathy to understand the person's position in life, because generally speaking, they're going to be quite nervous. It goes a long way of preparing yourself. And I can't do anything unless I write it down. You know, I was told once the difference between a plan and an idea is one of them's on paper.
Yeah.
So I've been following that for about 5 or 6 years now. So I write everything down, and it's what helps me be mindful and actually, you know, ensure that I'm doing what I'm intending to do, and not just, you know, flying by the seat of my pants, which is tough for me. I don't know if you can relate to this, Jeff.
It's interesting. So literally yesterday, Levi and myself, we were having a conversation in the other room talking about that very thing. We're really big about planning goals here at the beginning of the year, and Levi was mentioning that he was going back and reviewing his goals from last year, and he said it's very interesting that there's a lot of times that you just say, hey, I want to accomplish this, or I want to do this, and then you move on. And life happens, you know, and 6 months later, it's like, or 5 years later, you're like, yeah, I remember I said something about that one time. But if you document it, if it's written down on paper, then you have something to go back to and go, hey, you know what, did I make progress here or did I not? But there's something completely different about once it's documented versus if it's just verbalized.
See, I grew up as a young boy. This is so stereotypical. I apologize to all of Canada before I even say this, but, you know, I grew up as a young guy in Canada. I wanted to be a hockey player, you know, and all my friends were hockey players, and that's what we did. And, you know, the whole idea of goal setting and, you know, anything emotional based was, you know, frowned upon in the hockey culture. It was just, you know, and that's not what you did. And then, you know, I went to school, and actually my school, it's Dalhousie University. It's in the East Coast that's even east of you guys, but, it was big on emotional intelligence. And, you know, I got there and I was like, I'm not interested in this. What am I doing here? And now I look back on it 6 years later, it's the most valuable thing I've ever done. And what it's really done, you know, goal setting, if you told me 6 years ago I was going to have a journal and I was actually going to write down goals,
We lost him. Canada is frozen. You there?
You guys still there?
There you go. All right, you're back.
All right, sorry boys. That was literally my mom calling, so I just had to ignore my mom's call. I'll let her know. I'm not sure where I cut out there. But,
you were talking about goal setting, and if 5 years ago somebody would have, or I don't know how many years ago, somebody would have said you would have had a journal, you would have kind of laughed at it.
Yeah, and now I look back at it and I set goals, and I've actually gotten to the point where it's so regimented that I set myself reminders. We use Slack in our company, so I set Slack reminders to remind myself to make sure that I'm sticking to my goal, and it's daily. You know, I find that you just get so busy in the day, and you start running around, and before you know it, it's 3:00.
Yeah. And
that happens every day. So now I have specific times that I get Slack reminders to remind myself to do what I've decided is important, and that's really helped me in the last few months.
It is very, very true. So we could have 5 or 6 podcasts out of a lot of different topics that we could go into. On the hiring and team building front, you know, we talked about utilizing personality assessments to kind of help to understand where people are going to fit, hiring for fit within your company versus just hiring for a technical skill if you're in that. And even, I mean, we talk about that a lot in the locksmith and security industry based off of locksmith and security skill, but you can apply that to any other department in your organization. Sales, you can apply that to management, project management, any of those things. If you hire just for the skill and not for the culture, then you're really going to be off track. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. I know we have in the past have made poor hiring decisions based off of someone's high level of skill and less of their high level of culture fit. So it's just something to be mindful of as you're going through that process of building your team. Sometimes it's frustrating because, like you said earlier, you need to hire and you're trying to hire at a rapid pace, and sometimes your prioritization of, hey, here's somebody that knows how to do the job, let's put them in place, goes at a higher level than finding the right person for your organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's temporary fits. If we sit in our MSC business group once a month, and we've got a couple companies that are in the situation that we were in a few years ago, and they say, oh well, we need somebody right now, and if I had $1 for every time I heard, like, well, there just aren't locksmiths to hire,
yeah.
And so we don't have enough people, there aren't locksmiths. And it's like, if you keep saying this to yourself, at some point you got to realize that you're asking the wrong questions. If you can't find locksmiths, stop hiring locksmiths. Find our most recent technical side, and this is a kind of a golden nugget. We haven't hired a locksmith in probably a year, I would say. We've been hiring carpenters, transferable skills, carpenters with personality that fit our culture, and then we'll teach you how to deal with the lock part of it as well. And that's been really successful for us. But I think it's been our last. Realistically, it's probably been our last 6 or 7 technical people have all been carpenters and or finishing carpenters, and now we're doing lock work.
It's interesting, and I think I know for us, and because I think a lot of people are in the same situation, in any type of a business where you're hiring people, if you don't have a training program to train them, then it puts you more so in the process of hiring somebody that already has the trained skills and less of the culture fit. And it's a hard thing because it's an investment of resources to put somebody in a training role to specifically train people. So we just recently moved one of our technicians over to a training manager role, and that's their sole responsibility, is to train our new class of people as they're coming in, and then focus on continued education for our existing team. And that is in kind of where we've struggled in the past from hiring for culture fit and not on the technical skill or the person that's already been trained in that skill, is that we struggled to have a good process for them to fall into for training. So defining that, making that look better, making that something that's easily digestible, trackable is another avenue of success, and it will help you to be able to hire for that culture fit better.
Mm-hmm. There's something I would recommend highly to anyone that's going through this kind of building kind of stage as we are right now. There's a lot of concern out there when it comes to numbers that business owners don't want to open the books, so to speak, because they don't want to show too much, and they're either embarrassed or they're ashamed or whatever it is about the money and the dollars that are going through that. But I've been reading a book recently. It's called Open Book Management. I laugh. Chad, you're laughing at me. You've been reading this too?
You're fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, Open Book Management. It was published in 1995.
Wow.
So, I mean, yeah, this is revolutionary stuff. But anyway, it talks about, how can you expect someone to perform to a level if you don't know where they are, and that's the example they use is they take you bowling and they cover up the pins and you throw a ball and and you knock some down and they say, oh, you knocked down 6, and you're like, oh well, I guess that's good. How many were there to start with? If you don't know all the context, it's really hard to improve. And how do you align everyone in your company to want to improve and get into that hashtag always improving type of mentality? So what we've really started doing now is, and even with our training, it's not to the point where it's open book as in sales numbers, but we are right now developing kind of a scoreboard. So it's simple, just check marks. One of my partners, Jeremy, talked about in elementary school. So he's an old dog. This was 100 years ago. But he talked about in his grade 1 teacher, if they got something right or, did some little task, or they would get a blue star on their scoreboard. And the blue star didn't mean anything. It was a blue star that was posted in front of the class and everyone saw it. I think he might have got a 5-cent candy or something if you got 10 stars. Doesn't matter. But the point was that everyone tried to get those blue stars. And because you could see what everyone else was doing, it was a competitive thing. It was a friendly competitive thing, but we're trying to use that same mentality where if you do training in our company, you get a check mark and or a blue star. And what we've found is it just brings out the competitiveness, and it makes the learning portion of it, and the training and the bettering themselves, makes it a more enjoyable and when they want to do it, I guess is the best way to look at it. And that's half the battle right there.
Most definitely. I appreciate your time. I want to go ahead and close this episode of the podcast up because we will just have to schedule more time on a monthly basis or something like that to dive into these topics, because we're so kind of in line with where we're at as an organization, and there's so many things to take from this, from team building to learning how to set goals, how to share those goals with your team, how to motivate. And all of those things we could go on for hours and hours. But I really appreciate your time today. Appreciate your attentiveness to the podcast, and I'm really excited over the next 3 or 4 weeks. I'm trying to remember the exact number because we're getting ready to come up on Christmas. But over the next 3 or 4 weeks, we are going to be having multiple guests. We've got a guest from a co-working space here in Charlotte. We've got a guest for a gentleman that contacted me from Vermont that's going to be on the podcast in a couple of weeks, and then a small business that is just kind of a startup that we're going to have in about 3 weeks. So we've got a really good lineup over the next couple of weeks of podcasts, and we really look forward to those. In the meantime, Lars, stay warm in Canada, and we'll talk with you soon, and we'll see you next time here on the Coffee Break Podcast.